Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 5 Secrets from Successful Product Copy Teams. My name is Anna Geiger, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm the Director of Marketing at Talkoot, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session today. We'll get started here, and our speakers will unveil these 5 secrets and how you can start implementing some of these strategies at your own company as early as today. And then right after that, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session, so you can ask your questions to both Brian and Eric right away. And before I introduce them, I just want to go through a couple housekeeping items. First, you will have access to this presentation afterwards. We will send you a recording of the presentation tomorrow via an email, so look out for that. And as I mentioned, we'll have a dedicated Q&A right after the presentation, so go ahead and use that chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll gather all those questions and answer them at the end. And if we don't have time to answer your question, we'll be sure to follow up with you. And we'll also be looking for your questions if you want to tweet us at Talkoot_HQ. We'll be monitoring there. And feel free to share on your social networks your favorite secret or anything that you've learned from today. And without further ado, I'll introduce our speakers. So first we have Eric Hoppe, who's the Director of Marketing at Crowd Content, a leading content writing service that helps brands and retailers create high-quality content at scale. Eric has been working in marketing and product management for over a decade with companies in software, e-commerce, and content creation spaces. And Brian Hennessy is the CEO and co-founder of Talkoot, a product content collaboration tool that helps brands create more meaningful connections with their consumers on every product page. Before Talkoot, Brian was the global writing director at Adidas, and then he went on to found Thread, a story studio that helps great companies find their story, use it to create better products, more inspired workers, and more loyal customers. So without any further ado, here's Brian to unveil secret number 1.
Whoops. Thanks so much, Anna, and thanks everyone for being here. The single most important piece of advice that I'm going to probably give today, at least in my opinion, is that we should all stop writing product descriptions and start writing product stories. The reason being is that stories are how we humans create meaning, change minds, and influence behavior. And I'll give you a quick example. So if someone were to come into the office today and they just went to the best Thai restaurant they ever went to, I would ask them, tell me about it. And they would tell a story about their experience at the restaurant. They'd tell a whole bunch of details about the chef and the meal and who they went with, etc. And then if they told the story good enough, that would make me want to go to the restaurant. And that is true all over. That's how story works. Whether it's on a product page or in natural conversation, we use story to create meaning and change behavior. And here's another way story works. This is a picture of a pig cookie jar I pulled off eBay. If I were to go online and buy this cookie jar and someone was listing it and they didn't know what they had, I could probably pick this cookie jar up for about $10. That's how much cookie jars of this era go for on eBay. But if this person knew that this was made by the Shawnee company and it was a Smiley the Pig cookie jar, they would also know that this cookie jar is actually in Andy Warhol's collection as well. And so I'd have to pay about $500 for this cookie jar. Now, if you extend that further and you actually had Andy Warhol's cookie jar up for auction, that's going to go for, in 1988 dollars, it went for over $3,000. Now, the difference between these cookie jars, they all could have come off the same production line at the same day. But what changes is the ability that you can tell, the story that you can tell about that. In art and antiques, this is called provenance. It's basically, provenance is the story you can tell about the item before it goes up for sale. And provenance is something that they use in arts and antiques all the time. But provenance, the story, the backstory, is in everything that we buy. It's everywhere. And for an example, here are 2 axes you can buy right now on 2 different websites on the internet. On the right, you have a $34 axe, and with your $34 axe from Lowe's, you get exactly exactly 4 bullet points about the material makeup of that axe. That is a product description. On the left is an axe for sale for Best Made. With your $268 axe, you get a deep, interesting story. You get a whole bunch of provenance about where that axe was made, who designed it, where the wood was felled. Now, this is exactly this is what provenance is. It's kind of the story of that axe up until you hit the buy button. So not only do you get that description on the website, but you also get a 24-page axe manual that comes with that if you want to know more about that axe. So what this tells you is that we want story. We'll pay more for things that are more valuable to us. This story is a story of the craftsmanship and care that was put into that axe. So the other difference between these two axes is one is sold by Lowe's, which is a legacy retailer who is still trying to figure out how to sell perfectly online. The one on the left, Best Made, is a digital native vertical brand. These are brands that were born online. Oops. And so you might not be familiar with the term digital native vertical brand, but you probably noticed these logos. The difference between these brands and other brands is that these brands are actually outselling almost every other e-commerce website by a factor of 3. So they're selling 3 times, or they're growing 3 times faster than other e-commerce brands. The other thing that's important to know about these brands, well, one thing is that if you go to any product page on these brands, you'll still find that kind of deep, interesting product story, maybe not as long as the Best Made story, but as carefully written. And that's because, as Emily Weiss, the co-founder of Glossier, a digital native vertical brand, says, content is at the heart of everything they do at Glossier, and it's the heart of everything they do at all these digital native brands. And the reason why is because content, another word for content is conversation or stories. Stories and content are how we create relationships, and the whole idea of selling online is to create a relationships with consumers so that they trust you. It's one person geeking out about something, talking to another person. So just to take a look at a Glossier product page, if you read this product description of an eye and lip cream, product story of their eye and lip cream, what it sounds like is one person who is a health and beauty geek, just totally geeking out, talking to another person who also loves health and beauty about this new eye and lip cream they sold. It's full of conversational language. It's full of details and concrete language and specific references. This is how we talk in natural life. If you were to read this out loud, it would sound just like a conversation. So this is storytelling on a product page. And here is a product page from their largest legacy competitor. This is a twist-up crayon. I have a lip crayon. I have never used a twist-up lip crayon for obvious reasons. I don't know anything about this product, but I could have written this probably in 3 minutes. This is kind of marketing speak pulled out of a 1990s glamour magazine. This is how brands used to speak, but this doesn't cut it anymore in e-commerce, because in e-commerce, you actually have to understand your consumer and know what they really want and talk to them in the way that they like to talk about things. So to break down the difference between story and description, the easy way to think about it, I could go and do a whole webinar on this in itself, but the best way to think about it is that product descriptions purely describe what it is you're selling, just the facts and figures and the details about the product. What's it made of? What details can't I see from the image? Is it sustainable? How does it fit? What color is it? Story talks about why I should care primarily, and why I should care and how does it do what it does. So why I should care, you can talk about why it was designed, what problems does it solve, who designed it, what was their inspiration, where should I wear it, how should I use it, what are the benefits, do they support the reason you created it, all that kind of what I call backstory. So I'll give you another example. This is from a brand who is actually, I've cut them out, but this is a brand who's in chapter 11 right now. And if you look on all their product pages, this is what you find. It's a 100% what. What is it that you're thinking about buying today? Know why, know what it is, know How should I use it? Why did you create it? Who created it? No backstory. Now, if I go back to that Glossier image or that Glossier page and I diagram out how they talk, you can see that 75% of the copy on that page is why should I care? About 20% is how does it do what it does? And just about one sentence or 5% of that page is concerned with what is it that I'm looking at. So a product story is way more about why and how, and not, and you always need to talk about what you're selling. That's important, but it's not the main thing a product story is designed for. Now, the reason why these companies, digital native companies, tell really deep, interesting stories on their product pages just simply because they're incredibly excited about what they're creating. They're people who actually love what they do. But the other reason, another very important reason, is that product stories are the #1 factor in influencing online purchase. So what I usually see is product e-commerce companies that have virtual reality, and they have retargeting engines, and they have suggestion engines, and they have all this technology that they've spent money building into their e-commerce site, but they have terrible product descriptions that no one wants to buy from. So what I always say is start from where these digital native brands start. Start at a great product story. That's where these companies became famous. Start at the story, and then after you create great stories, then you can build out technology out there to increase conversion and sales after that. So now I'm going to hand it over to Eric to talk about SEO.
Thanks, Brian. I'm really glad that we started with such a deep look at just how important product story is. I want to add a little bit to that, though, and talk about how product story can also help your customers find you. So the first secret that I want to talk about is something that I've surprisingly seen several brands overlook, and that's SEO for product stories. I think it's an incredibly foundational part of the process because organic traffic is a huge driver of online sales. It's critical that you know what keywords your customers are using to search for, along with what their intent in doing so is. And you need to make sure that your product copy solves that intent. That's really key to ranking in Google these days. So basically, you need to understand what path your customers are on and make sure that you're on that path. So this is some data that I pulled from SEMrush. I just want to illustrate how important SEO traffic is to some of the world's biggest brands. So the table you're seeing here basically shows their SEO performance. You'll see how many keywords they're ranking for in the top 100 in Google's US search index, as well as an estimated dollar value for how much that traffic is worth. So that's an estimate that's based on how much the clicks would cost them if they were to bid on those keywords in Google Ads. So you can see that all of these brands are getting millions of dollars worth of traffic every month organically. It's also important to note the split between branded traffic, which is searches primarily for their brand names, as well as non-branded traffic. So a brand like Nike, obviously huge. It's not surprising they're getting almost 24 million monthly visits from their SEO, mostly people looking for Nike. But it's worth noting that they're also getting 11 million visits from people looking for non-Nike things, like shoes or clothing, things like that. So that's a huge source of people coming in that are basically being told by Google that Nike products are the best result for non-branded searches. So immense value in that. And just to build on that a little more, I always like to talk about this stat, and that's that 93% of all online activity starts with a search. And most often that is a Google search, but it can also be a search on Amazon, YouTube, Google Images, or even your own site's internal search. But the bottom line is that your customers are using search to solve their challenges and find what they're looking for. So you need to ensure that your product copy is optimized to be sure they will find you. So how do you do that, though? Well, you need to start by understanding search intent. And that means you're going to use tools to research what your customers are searching for, such as the ones listed on the screen right now. There's a lot of them, though. and that'll help you identify what searches have the most volume so that you can prioritize for those. From there, you want to understand what searchers are looking to do when they search using those search phrases. So for example, if someone searched for the phrase type of tents in Google, that would indicate they're looking to learn more about what options they have when they're buying a tent. You wouldn't want to shoehorn a product description to try and rank for that, but you could write a blog post or potentially even a category page. So there's a lot of tools that are going to help you do that research, but what's really important is to just find those key keywords that can help you learn about intent, and then make sure that you are not just plugging keywords into your product stories, but that you're really trying to satisfy your searcher's objective. So just another example here. This is a tool that I like to use. This is SEMrush's Keyword Magic tool. So you're probably familiar with tools like this, but gives you some pretty essential information. By entering one seed keyword, you can find a slew of related keywords that might help you choose keywords that you can group together based on intent that you can then map to one page. So you find those related keywords. You also get search volumes, which will help guide you in terms of what keywords you want to prioritize ranking for. You can also see how expensive bidding on those keywords in Google Ads would be, which gives you a good sense of how valuable the traffic that you're going after is. So once you have the keyword research done and you know what keywords and what intents you need to cover with your site's content, you need to map that content to different pages on your site. So we like to think of different intents being linked to different stages of the buyer's journey. So someone who's at the awareness stage is probably using broad and more general keywords when they search. They'd be looking for a keyword like the word tents, and you'd want to link that to more of an informational page that's going to help them learn more about different types of tents. So that could be a blog post or a category page, something like that. If someone's at the consideration phase, they're narrowing down their search, but they're still not ready to make a purchase. So they might be using long tail keywords like pop-up tents in this case. So that's a good place where you can add content to a category page and help people discover more about what they're researching and then link off to some products from there. Once someone's at the decision phase, they pretty much know what they want, or they're very close to knowing what they want. So they'd be searching using long tail keywords, often keywords that show commercial intent. So in our example here, buy Coleman pop-up tent shows a very clear intent that they want a specific product, as well as having buy in the search phrase means that they're very close to a purchase. So these are your money keywords and probably your highest value searchers that you want to bring into your site. So absolutely critical that you have amazing product pages with great product stories that can not only bring them into the site, but then convert them. So how you're going to add these keywords to the different types of content that we've talked about is going to vary a bit depending on the format. But most brands are finding that one keyword is indicative of intent that they try to optimize for. They'll then place it prominently in places like the page title, the first heading, and early on in the text. You might also add in some secondary keywords, but really you don't want to overdo it. At the end of the day, you just need to understand the intent behind what people are searching for and make sure that your product story speaks to that. So you could spend a lot of time researching keywords, especially if you've got a lot of products on your site. Ideally, you'd be able to spend the time to do that keyword research for each product, but sometimes when it is a volume game, you might not have the bandwidth to do it. So in those cases, we've actually seen a lot of clients succeeding by relying on keyword formulas. So this lets you create keywords based around your product's key details, while still letting your writers optimize the copy appropriately. So this is just one example that we've seen some clients working with to create keywords. Ultimately, you need to identify the most important elements of your product's keywords and then build those into your formulas. But this one basically takes the brand plus the model name plus a descriptor along with a generic term for the product. So building on our tent example, Coleman is the brand, Sundome is the model name, for person would be the descriptor, and then tent is the generic product term. So writers can usually do this for themselves. And using this example, you actually get a keyword that would be very similar to what you would find if you had done the keyword research yourself, without you having to do it. So then the writers can still go and optimize the content using this keyword they've created themselves, and you're still seeing the SEO value. So it's not foolproof, but if you're challenged with scale, this is a great option to consider. And with that, I am going to hand it back to Brian, and he's going to talk about how you can properly set up a process for doing all these things that we're talking about.
Thanks, Eric. So writing, 3, 10, 5 product descriptions a day, most anyone can do. The problems arise when you have to create, 500, 1,000, or 10,000 products per descriptions per product stories per season. When you're creating product stories at scale, you have to think team, process, and tools. So I like to describe it. When I think about something that I really love, I think about my running hat. Some company produces this running hat. They produce thousands of running hats, and they're of really high quality. They are done efficiently, and they're priced right. And so you can create really high quality things. Oftentimes people think that you can't create creative at scale, but you can create things at scale, really great things. You just have to think team, process, and tools. And so when a company goes to create a hat like this or a jacket or anything, they don't hire a hat maker and sit them down in a cubicle and say, okay, design the hat, find some materials, cut those materials out, sew a hat, et cetera, et cetera. When you create a product at scale, you have what's called a product lifecycle. And a product lifecycle is a series of steps that you go through to turn raw materials into a finished consumer-ready product. So at the front end, you have concept and design, and then it goes to development, and then production, and so on and so forth. And that's how you create high-quality things at scale. But what's interesting that I find is that brands that can create really high-quality products at scale, when they go to create high-quality content at scale, what do? They hire a writer, and they put them in a room, and they give them a spreadsheet full of product data. And they say, okay, I'll come back in a month, and I'll take a look at the product descriptions you write. This is exactly what Adidas did with me when I first started writing the product copy for Adidas. No one exactly knew how to do it, 10 years ago. So I sat down in a cubicle and I got a spreadsheet full of data. A lot of it was missing, and I started to go to work. And what I quickly realized is that instead of just writing, what I was doing is I was doing 6 jobs. And most of these jobs, I was a good writer, but I was a terrible product manager. I was way overqualified for some of the jobs that I was doing, and I was way underqualified for other jobs that I was doing, like project management. If you know me, you know that I'm a terrible project manager. And so what I did early on is I realized that instead of having one person do a full-time job, I could hire 6 people, and we could all do part-time jobs. And what that would allow me to do it would free me up to do other writing work for the brand or other writing work for other customers. And so slowly over time, I started hiring. First, I hired a researcher to go down and track down all the missing details so that I had everything I needed to write. And then once I had that, I hired a project manager to help me manage the project and go all the way through from raw data to completion and make sure that we were hitting our deadlines. And then I hired a writer. And what I ended up with was a complete content team. And so this is what my complete content team looked like when we were writing product copy for Adidas. I was the content lead. I worked with a product manager. She and I worked alongside the product managers at the brands, the brand managers, and the merchandisers, making sure we got the right information and making sure the copy was on point. And then I hired freelancers for pretty much everything else. Actually, I had freelancers for everything to begin with. But in the end, what works really well is having an in-house writer, especially when you have lots of different types of products to write for. In my experience, I'm a runner. I know everything backwards and forwards. I can write running copy falling over backwards, but I don't play basketball. I know nothing about basketball. So for the first year or so, I had to write basketball copy, and I knew I wasn't good at it. So I went out and I found a freelancer who loved to write basketball copy, and he did it for a couple of hours a month, and he was happy. what this does, building out a team, rather than waiting until you're over busy, start beforehand and build out a freelance team. What that leads to is better quality copy. It's way more efficient, way faster to get done, and it's shock resistant. So if you have to do, a rewrite of 50 pieces of copy because you need to change some legal phrase, or if the advertising campaign that is going out that's leading to this product copy changes and you want to talk about something completely different, reframe how you talk about the copy, you can do those things and you don't have to sit up all night. One writer doesn't have to sit up all night until 2 a.m. to get it done. So once you have your team full of skilled people, you need to create your product content lifecycle. And it's good to think stages, even if you're one person or 3 people, you want to set up stages so you know what you're doing and when you're doing it. And so what I like to say is there's a product content lifecycle, and that's turning raw data, facts and figures, and you move them through stages. You first gather input and create a brief, and you do your SEO research, and then it moves on to, once you have all that, the data ready to go, then you move on to the write and enrich stage. Once that is done, you move on to the review and approve stage, et cetera, until you have a high converting, consumer ready product story ready to go live on your website. So even if you have a great team and a great process, you still need specific tools. So if you think of it like, if you're going to build cars, you can hire a whole bunch of people who have deep experience building a car, and you can create a process. But if you don't surround them with the right tools, you're setting them up for failure. The same is true with product content. You have a team full of experienced writers, you have a great process, but to really get it right, you have to have tools as well. And I know from experience that probably most of you are working in some version of Excel and spreadsheets or Google Docs and some project management tool. But as one of our customers at Doc Martens wisely said, writing product copy in Excel is like using a toothbrush to sweep a gym floor. Excel is built for numbers. It's just not built for product copy, especially at scale. There's no visibility. There's hardly any collaboration. You have to move everything through in really big chunks. And so rather than Excel, and everybody's process is going to be different, and everybody's tools are going to be different. But the way we like to think about tools is the documents we need to keep all those freelancers on track, the digital systems you need to keep everyone collaborating and create that visibility, and then seasonal events. I know events aren't necessarily tools, but it is a tool for us. So to start off with events, what we do every season is we have in-person kickoffs with product teams, or what we did is have in-person kickoffs with product teams. I know not everybody works for a brand, but basically what you want to do is have a step where you actually talk with people possibly, or do research that isn't just facts and figures. Figure out who it is you're talking to, what's important to them, listen for the backstory. Because a lot of the backstory isn't available in systems, it's not available in catalogs. You're going to have to do the research and ask questions and find the backstory. And then once you find that backstory, you want to have content briefing teams with your team. And then after every season, after every month, or however you do your product copy, you want to have post-season debriefings. And this is how we built this system, is every season we stopped and said, okay, what was terrible? How come I stayed up, until 2 a.m. for 4 nights in a row? How can we not do that next season? And slowly but surely, we created a fine-tuned process that was super efficient. It's not going to go smoothly the first season or the second season, but eventually you're going to have a really smooth working season. The other 2 documents that we use often are brand glossary. Just what are those circle R's? Where do they go? How exactly to describe that? What, for us, we're dealing with shoes. What is a midsole? What's the difference between a midsole and an upper? And then also having a style guide where you talk about, we never say this, our brand is always about creativity. It's never about war. What is the language you use in your brand? Having these tools helps keep a whole team on track. And then finally, digital systems. We love Slack. It's just about the most collaborative piece of software out there, but we also love Talkoot, and this is the one plug I'm going to give. Talkoot is kind of like the Tesla production plant for product content production. It has everything everybody needs. Everyone can log in and see what everybody else is doing. It has everything you need to create really high quality content. And for us, we could never go back to spreadsheets and spreadsheets and email without it. But the things to think about in terms of tools is what tools, or what's really important is having a workflow, having a process that you can go through step by step and have skilled people at every stage doing what they need to do and knowing when to do it and when to hand it off to the next stage. The next thing you need is visibility, the ability to oversee everything that's going on and drill down and take a look at product copy for that new freelancer who's working for you and see if they're really getting it right in those first 5 pieces of copy. And then thirdly, collaboration is key, making sure everyone can ask questions about the products and get answers in real time so that everyone can keep this process moving. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric for secret number 4.
Thanks, Brian. So I really want to build on what Brian was talking about. To us, process is key as well. So our business helps brands add freelance writers to their team in a way that supports and works within a broader process that they should have defined. So we've actually designed our enterprise production to operate in a similar way to the product copy supply chain Brian's been mentioning. So years ago, we were getting going. We got a deal to write product copy for a Fortune 500 retailer. So obviously very thrilled, and we just got to work assigning the work out to a team of freelancers. And while the copy read well, it wasn't quite what the client needed. Wasn't quite on brand. It missed some things from the style guide, and just a few other requirements weren't met. So that's when we brought in a head of production, and she implemented a process very similar to the product copy supply chain, which effectively let us build up the client's capacity by adding freelancers and ensuring that their finished product was publish ready. Basically, what we're saying is you need to build your freelance bench the right way. And that ultimately comes down to succeeding with freelancers. So it's not hard to see why adding freelancers is an attractive option. Many brands have huge amounts of product copy they have to write, and internal resources can really get strained. Bringing freelancers in with an existing process can help deal with these capacity challenges. It can also represent substantial cost savings. And in the example that Brian gave, you can also find subject matter experts that you might not have on your team, such as Brian's basketball freelance writer. But it's really important that you bring freelancers on in a way that's going to help you and not create additional challenges in your process. So that means that you need to find the right writers, you have to give them the right information, create a feedback loop with them, and make sure that you are leveraging templates. So when we talk about how brands can hire freelancers, we always highlight that there's a few different ways you could go about it. So first, you could build your own team of freelancers. This can work really well, but it's probably the most labor-intensive option for you and your team. You'll have to handle recruitment, vetting writers, communicating with them, and coordinating assignments. Additionally, you'd have to do your own QA on any content that comes in. You could look at hiring a marketing agency. So these companies often do really good work, and they do take out a lot of the manual elements of recruitment and project management. But often they're also outsourcing the work to someone else. So you're kind of getting a middleman type of situation. They're also often not focused solely on product copywriting. So you might not get some of the same efficiencies that you would get with some other options available to you. And finally, you could hire a content writing service. So our enterprise service offers a fully managed service that handles recruitment, training, project management, quality assurance, and right through to delivery of the publish-ready content. So the end goal is that that content is ready for you to publish when you get it. In a sense, this lets you bring several elements of your product copy supply chain into our system, which is going to let you add freelancers to your system without straining other parts of your process, such as your editors or your QA teams. Regardless of what option you do choose to go with, though, just make sure that you're finding writers that are both experienced in your product's vertical and are skilled at writing product copy. So when we look at this, frankly, the different options that we talked about just now, they can work under the right settings in any case. So usually, whether it's going to work for your brand or not is going to depend on some unique circumstances that your team has. One of the biggest ones is your capacity. So we always recommend that you do some calculations to determine what option is best for you. What you see on this slide here are some ballpark figures that we've developed based on some of our clients' projects. So this is what we would put into writing a 500-word product description. So we might spend 15 minutes doing research, including doing some keyword research to support SEO. It might take us 45 minutes to write a 500-word product description, and we might spend about 20 minutes editing and doing quality assurance on it. So once you know how long one individual piece is going to take you, you can quickly calculate the total number of hours that you would need in each function to get your total batch created. Based on that, you can figure out how long it would take your internal team to produce it. And if you're happy with that timeline, then that's great, you're all set. If not, you might want to consider outsourcing using one of the options from the previous slide. And if you do decide that outsourcing is the way to go for you, it's really comes down to determining who's going to be the best partner for you and which method you're going to look to. So really, it's going to come down to 4 main factors. Look at your potential partner's experience. Do they understand your vertical? Are they good at writing product copy? Look at their cost as well. There's a wide range of pricing in the content writing services space, and many options could wind up being significantly more expensive than your in-house team is able to produce copy at. So definitely something to consider. You also want to know what their capacity is. If you're outsourcing to increase your capacity, you want to be sure that the partner that you contract actually has the capacity to get your project done on the timeline that you want. And finally, understand what degree of project management they're going to provide for you, or if you're going to have to provide that yourself, and if you have the bandwidth to do that. The next thing that we want to talk about when it comes to hiring freelancers appropriately is making sure that they have the right information. And that largely comes down to giving them good creative briefs, your style guide, as well as examples of near perfect product stories that they can emulate. So tying this back to the product copy supply chain, this is really all stuff that you should have before any writing ever starts. At Crowd Content, if our clients don't have this heading into a project, we'll start here to help them create these resources to make sure that the writers that get added to their teams have clear instructions and guidance, and that editing and QA knows what to review against. We also see a lot of clients that end up failing with hiring freelancers, doing so because they get going too fast. So even if you have a style guide that you've provided and a brief, sometimes things are going to get missed when you first get going with freelancers. Chances are that your internal teams know your products and your brand better than your freelancers will in the outset. So that's why we always start with a small test batch. We'll create a small amount of content, deliver it to the client, and then get feedback from them. Based on the feedback we get, we update the style guide as well as any future creative briefs. So this really lets you catch problems early on before you've completed a much larger batch that all have common problems that you would have to fix. We actually call this process calibration. It's a key part of what we do, and it's an ongoing continuous feedback loop where we're constantly learning and constantly getting better for the clients. And the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to hiring freelancers and bringing them into your process is to make sure that you leverage templates. So one thing that we've seen be a challenge for brands when they're creating product stories at scale is that the content generally needs to be formatted in a very specific way so that it plugs in properly to their content management system. So we actually use a template system so that each field gets its own editing box along with specific instructions and brand rules that prevent writers from breaking your template. So what we've seen is that errors in just one product description can have big impacts on the entire batch. So it's important you have a system in place to ensure that your templates are followed exactly. A lot of these brands are doing imports into their system either through API or through, much to our friend at Talkoot's chagrin, through spreadsheets. But if there's one small error in a cell, it can create big problems. So just ensuring consistency through templates is really important. What you see on screen here is a very basic template that one of our clients has given out for some pretty short product descriptions. Basically, they specify the requirements of their meta description and title, their first heading, short description, long description, and basically they're just including character counts as well as where keywords should be placed to support their SEO. So you can create your own templates, obviously, but just one tip that we've seen is that if freelancers are able to work within your templates, you're going to get a much better result, and it's going to go a lot smoother. And that's the fourth secret. With the fifth secret, we actually just want to talk about how it's important that you do all of these things, but it's important that you also continually look back and refresh the product stories you've already created. So basically, you just need to keep your product stories fresh. So there's a number of different reasons why brands need to keep their content fresh. The main ones that we see brands focusing on boil down to SEO factors, as well as needing to keep information relevant and accurate. So the first thing I want to talk about is why it's important for SEO. So Google actually rewards freshness through its freshness algorithm. So just the act of refreshing content can actually help your rankings. To determine your freshness score, Google's looking at how often you're adding new content, how often you're updating your existing content, and how much of your content you're updating. So the SEO world generally agrees that keeping your site's content fresh is a very important ranking factor with Google. And really, when you think about it, from Google's perspective, they're just thinking that if a site's not updated that frequently, it's probably losing relevancy. So you don't want to fall into that situation. And the other thing to consider from an SEO perspective is most SEOs will be watching their rankings like hawks. If they have product pages that have been live for any length of time and they're not on page one, they're thinking how they can get there. All things being equal, if you've got good site structure, backlinks, page speed, other important SEO factors, it likely is that your content could be improved. So if you're not getting the rankings that you want, always good to look at freshening up the content. So here's some things that you could look at updating to drive better results through your content. So we just talked about the importance of freshness. So if something hasn't been updated in quite a while, definitely recommend just refreshing it in general. You also want to look at the search intent behind your pages. Have a look at what keywords you're currently ranking for, understand what the search intent behind those is, and then make sure that your copy satisfies it. You can also look at topical completeness. So a lot of times this involves looking at the LSI keywords that surround your main keyword that you're trying to rank for, related topics, things like that. And really just look and see if you're properly covering that. If these are things that your readers would expect you to cover that you're not, Google's probably thinking the same thing. So making your content more complete can really give you a leg up on your competition. And you also want to look at your competitive landscape. So if you're competing with massive sites like Amazon or Walmart, it's probably going to be really tough to snag the top spots in search results. But that said, if you can provide better, which is often longer, content than your competitors, you might see a lift. And you can also really leverage product stories to create content that's a lot more engaging, which could drive better results for you. We actually recommend you look at the readability of your copy too. So if it is reading well, if it tells a good story, and the reader is hooked, it's going to contribute to better behavioral metrics, such as time on site, reducing your bounce rate, and ultimately that indirectly impacts rankings through Google's RankBrain machine learning algorithm. So that's looking at those behavioral metrics as a way to see how good your experience is. So if your copy is a bit weak and you have poor behavioral metrics, it's really critical that you revise it. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Brian, and he's going to talk a little bit about why you would refresh for other reasons.
Yeah, a quick reason that we, back in the day when I was creating product copy, we would refresh copy every season, based on not just Google search intent, but why is a person coming to the website? What are they looking for? So we would have the same shirt, for instance, a running shirt. And for spring and summer, we might call the product out as a lightweight t-shirt to keep you cool and dry. And what would happen is we would do that once, and then I would go back onto the website and take a look at and review the copy. And I would see it'd be the dead of winter in North America, and you'd have a description calling for a lightweight t-shirt or telling you about a lightweight t-shirt to keep you cool and dry in the heat. And you can easily refresh that and reframe that shirt to be a long sleeve base layer to keep you dry and warm. Both of these things are actually true, and both of these things people would buy the shirt to accomplish. So you just want to freshen that up for seasonal variations and why people buy. You also want to freshen it up seasonally when it comes to advertising campaigns that are supporting a product. If you have kind of halo products, what happens is the ad campaign will change out above the product description. So for instance, one season, the shirt might be marketed as a comfortable alternative for your long runs. And so what you want to tell on the product page is a story of comfort. The next season, they might call it the fastest shirt on the road. And so you want to make sure that your story on the product page reflects the story that they're telling in their outbound communications. Because what happens is if a consumer sees the ad campaign and clicks on through to the product page, and they were told that they're getting the fastest shirt on the road, and you're telling a story of comfort, there's a little seed of doubt that happens in their brain, and they go, is this the right product? I don't know if they might have redirected me to the wrong product, and they click away. And that's important over, thousands and thousands of pieces or thousands and thousands of products. That kind of thing can have a true impact on your revenue. So always think about seasonality and keeping it fresh for consumers and why they buy. So those are the 5 secrets. The first one, write stories versus writing descriptions. And number 2, when you think about SEO, write the way shoppers buy, write for what they're searching for. And number 3, if you really want to scale your content, you got to think team, process, and tools. And part of team is making sure you build out a freelance bench. I can tell you from firsthand experience, one of the most painful things to do is finding great writers, training up those great writers, and then having those freelancers leave 3 months after you spent all that time training them. So make sure you spend time and take the time to build out a freelance bench. And then also always keep your content fresh, because Google likes fresh content, as do consumers.
All right, there you have it, everyone. The 5 secrets unveiled. Let's jump right into your questions. First up, how would you create product descriptions for 20 different products if they're all very similar, the same thing, but slightly different? How could you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, we used to come across this all the time. What you'd want to do is you want to think about the consumer and what's different for them. So you don't want to create differentiation for differentiation's sake. You just want to know that they're going to be comparing products on your website. So they're going to look at one product versus another, and they really want to know, like, what's the difference. And if it's just to say a color variation, that's okay to say. Say this is a bright, colorful version of the same shirt, and this is a sleek black version of the shirt. So what you want to do is standardize, have most of the description, most of the product copy be the same if it's the same product, but then just use one sentence at the intro to talk about the variation.
And what if you don't have a e-commerce site or a buy now button? How would you approach writing your product story then?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Eric.
You can go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that I used to do a lot of product copywriting. Most of the time before I wrote e-commerce copy, I was writing about products, and I think that the approach doesn't change. What you want to do, the first thing to know about a product copy is just write conversationally. Write as you would. What I always told our writers is say it out loud. Write your description and read it out loud. If you wouldn't say it out loud to a friend, don't put it in the description. That's number 1, be conversational. Number 2 is products or stories are always about people. So always open it up about someone who has used it, who designed it and what their inspiration was. Even if it's not a specific person, talk about how a person uses the product. So for instance, instead of talking about generalized people, what I always try and do is talk about a specific person. Or maybe, a good example would be to take a look at some of those product pages on those digital native brands. They do a really good job. Huckberry is one that I just came across. They wrote a boot. It was the ultimate waterproof boot by Extra Tough. And instead of just saying, hey, this is the ultimate waterproof boot, they framed it in terms of Alaskan fishermen. And they say, this is the boot Alaskan fishermen wear. So what you want to do is find the benefit of the product and then find some situation that people would use that benefit in. So if it's a lightweight hiking boot, talk about hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. If it's a waterproof boot, talk about how fishermen need waterproof boot. And if fishermen use this boot, then someone else you could use this boot.
And I think too, it's if you're not like in an e-commerce or an online setting, definitely follow the advice that Brian has given. I think it just requires you to shift focus on your call to action a little bit. And so if you're not trying to compel someone to click that buy now button, you might be trying to compel them to find a retailer in your area, or just connect them with how they can actually take the next step to getting your product.
Mm-hmm. And where do you guys recommend finding those great writers, whether you want to bring them in-house or as freelancers?
I guess this is where I can make a shameless plug, hey? So we do have a network of over 6,000 writers that we vetted, so we're a great source. There are a lot of great ways to find good freelancers, though. Lots of freelance-specific job boards you can recruit from. I think you can go to even job sites and recruit freelancers there. But I think it's really important that you're just identifying what you need in a freelance writer, and don't rush too much into bringing someone on that you want to be a regular contributor for a long time, and actually have like a proper vetting process before you start work.
And if we're keeping our product copy fresh, in 10 years from now, will every product search return huge product pages and huge amounts of data?
Do you want to take this one, or should I take this one? I think that when you are refreshing your content, it's not just adding on additional content to what you already have. So I think it's important to not be afraid to kind of almost rewrite what you have as well as adding to it. And I really wouldn't focus on just adding content for content link's sake. But if you're going through that SEO process and you're identifying, oh, I should be covering this topic and this topic, or people are commonly asking us questions about this, build that type of content out. But I wouldn't just pad out the word count by any stretch.
And how do you balance geeking out over a specific product and not alienating new or unfamiliar customers?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I will take this. And there's another question from Christina. It says, I can kind of answer both with one answer. Is there a sweet spot on product story length? Those Glossier ones seem really long. So the answer to both of those is, for a direct-to-consumer site, you really want to talk to those geeks. You want to talk to what is called opinion leaders, because those people, if you have, I'll go back to Glossier. If you really nail the story and experience for them, what they do is they go tell their friends, and they go tell their friends and their friends, and that's how you get organic growth of an e-commerce website. So for direct-to-consumer, you really do want to focus on those people who really care about the products. When you're selling on Amazon or you're selling on other marketplaces, those are the places where you want to kind of have a short, quick description. One of our customers, Burton, for instance, has completely different copy on their website than they do on Amazon, because on Amazon, that's where you get the new snowboarders and the parents looking for gifts. And on burton.com, that's where they really talk to the snowboarders. Now, in terms of length, a good one to check out is tracksmith.com. It's a running digital native brand. And it's not necessarily about the length. It's about serving up the information so that people that just want to get in and get out and buy something have a little bit of information above the fold. But then with Tracksmith, I think they do a really great job of, you can scroll down and they have an incredibly deep story, great photography. And for me, who, again, I'm a runner, I really geek out on running gear. I love to go to their website and just page down that product page and read all about the inspiration behind the products. But for those who just want to get in and get out, they just have a little description right next to the buy button that explains exactly what you're going to get, and you hit buy and you're gone.
I'll just add one small thing. From an SEO perspective, I definitely agree with everything that Brian said. But when it comes to targeting word counts, a lot of it's going to come down to the competitive landscape of who you're trying to compete with and for what keywords. So if you can kind of audit how much they've written as well as what they've written about, I don't want to say you have to write more than them, but it gives you a good benchmark, and it certainly can help you identify what topics you should be covering, because obviously Google already thinks that's good content. You kind of need to outperform what's already ranking well.
Yeah, don't be afraid of long content. I think for the longest time, I mean, I, for one, had a strict rule. I mean, it wasn't my rule. It was someone told me 250 characters. You can't do anything more than 250 characters. But, if I'm going to buy a pair of socks, I think, 100 characters is fine. If I want to go buy something I really care about, a 3-season tent, and I'm about to go on a long, camping trip, I really want to know a lot about that tent. So it has to do with the kind of product.
Agreed.
All right, another one regarding secret number 2 and writing the way shoppers buy. What about product titles? How do you keep that template, but keep the balance of keeping it conversational so it's how the customer would actually refer to the product?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times where people get a bit challenged is if they're working with a specific keyword that they're trying to fit into their title. And the old way of doing SEO is that you would have to get the keyword in exactly as it appears in Google search. And fortunately for writers and for consumers, that's not a hard rule anymore. So you can work in those keywords and kind of build stop words and punctuation and stuff into how you actually insert the keyword. So we would always recommend never force in a keyword just to have it in there, and always make sure that you get it in there in a way that still reads well and focus on the user's experience when they're reading your content rather than shoehorning in a keyword exactly.
Sense. And if you're a brand with many different products, how can you go about creating a story for every single one of them?
That's actually a webinar in itself. There
Part
are
two.
This is something that you have to keep vigilant and train. For me, I had to train writers to go out and take that step and teach them. Basically, for me, what I told my writers was, if you don't create a really cool, interesting story for each product, you're going to have, if you just dial it in or phone it in, I'm going to have you revise it anyway. So take 3 minutes, sit down before you write that piece of copy and do a quick little Google search about what you're about to write. And what I would go to, for writing basketball copy, I would go to YouTube and listen to how coaches talk about basketball. And then I would use their language. Just try and kind of immerse yourself in the language, especially if you have a lot of products to describe that are, in a similar vertical. Just take a few minutes and go immerse yourselves in websites, not just product websites, but listen to, if you're talking about, furniture, go peruse chat rooms that talk about furniture. Go listen to how people talk about furniture, not brands, but people talk about furniture, so that you kind of preload your brain with all that language and then start to write. I find once you get going and once you have that going, you can write product copy a lot quicker and faster, and it's really great.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. That's all the time we have right now. And as I mentioned, look for a follow-up email from us tomorrow with a link to the recording of the presentation. And check out more ways to scale your product stories. Follow us, both Crowd Content and Talkoot on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.